The Doctor. In the TARDIS. Next stop, everywhere.
Hello again, everyone. Welcome back to Next Stop Everywhere, the Doctor Who podcast. I'm Charles Skaggs, one of your co-hosts here as we talk Colony in Space for episode 152. And I'm here with my partner in time, everyone's favorite partner in time, Jesse Jackson. Hi, Jesse. How are you today?
Hello, Charles. Thank you so much. I'm very excited. For those of you who came in late,
yes,
we are picking this because we just talked Sarah Jane Smith.
Yes.
And we had the return.
The death of the Doctor in
Yes.
Sarah Jane Adventures with Joe Grant.
Yes. And so I said, hey, I want to talk an episode of the classic with Joe Grant, and be careful what you wish for. That happened. So, yes.
Well, let's put it right off the bat. I gave Jesse a choice of 3 episodes. I gave him the choice of, let's see, what was it? Terror of the Autons, which had the first appearance of Joe Grant, and also the first appearance of the Master, and this episode, Colony in Space, and then I also gave him the Green Death, which was the last appearance of Joe Grant. And Jesse chose this one. So what was it? What was it about this episode before we get started that made you go for this one as opposed to the other 2 others?
So I believe I've seen the Green Death. We haven't talked about it, but
Right.
I remember I have watched it. I believe.
Okay.
And I believe I had seen Terror of the Entrons, because isn't that kind of remade
Autons.
for the very first episode? Isn't that kind of the Christopher Eccleston's first episode?
Well, that was
this kind of.
Well, Rose is essentially a version of Spearhead from Space.
Okay, but
The first Pertwee episode, but this one, this is this was the second Autons episode.
okay.
And but it also was the first one that introduced the Master and Joe Grant.
So I thought this one sounded fun, and I was not disappointed.
Yeah,
This is a good episode.
This is Joe Grant's first trip in the TARDIS, as it turns out.
And is this not the first trip on a TARDIS in a long time? Right.
Well, and
He's been stuck on Earth
in a couple of seasons. Yes. This is the first time that the third Doctor, who was essentially exiled on Earth, finally gets to leave Earth for a little bit, as a result of the Time Lords essentially putting him and drafting him for a mission, whether he likes it or not.
And so I thought this sounded like there would be a nice collection of kind of a lot of interactions. I did not know it was a Master episode.
Right.
So yeah, I was really pleased I picked it out, and I enjoyed it. I have, a few criticisms, but overall, I was pretty happy with this. And I was pretty happy seeing Joe Grant as I don't want to say traditional, but a classic stereotypical companion.
Yeah, this is essentially... Go ahead.
Yeah, just often there is a kind of, the companions are there to ask questions and to be rescued, and I don't think that's true, but that is what the stereotype of companions are.
Right.
And I think she plays a little bit to that.
Okay. So this is, like I said, this is Colony in Space, the fourth serial of season 8 that aired in 1971, written by the incredible Malcolm Hulke. See what I did there?
Yeah.
Directed by Michael E. Bryant, and of course starring Jon Pertwee as the Third Doctor and Katy Manning as Jo Grant. This is Jo's fourth story by this point. So she's kind of settled into the role a little bit. But obviously this is her first trip in the TARDIS, and unlike some companions, she's a little trouble dealing with that at first, but kind of gets into it later on. So she's a bit reluctant and a bit nervous about it, which makes for an interesting change. And but she does kind of settle into it, and that's one of the things we'll talk about as we talk about our topics. Mm-hmm. All right, guest cast this time. We just kind of get a little bit of a cameo, more like from Nicholas Courtney as the Brigadier at the beginning of episode 1 and at the end of episode 6, when the TARDIS returns just moments after it left. We get Roger Delgado as the first Master, who doesn't show up until halfway through the story, where he turns up as the Adjudicator and surprises, obviously, the Doctor and Jo Grant. We have Graham Lehman, Peter Forbes Robertson, and John Baker as Time Lords, who kind of show up in a bit of a cameo at the beginning. And Roy Skelton, who played Wilfred Norton, the rather treacherous and traitorous Wilfred Norton, working secretly for the IMC. He's most notable because he's done a lot of Dalek voices in the classic series, and he was actually one of the first Cybermen voices in The 10th Planet. So he normally does vocal work for Doctor Who, but he's also appeared in some other stories. He played Wester in Planet of the Daleks, another Jon Pertwee story. He played James in The Green Death, which obviously is another Jon Pertwee story. And he played Marshal Chidaki in The Android Invasion, a Tom Baker classic. And King Rokon in The Hand of Fear, which was the last story with Sarah Jane Smith.
Oh, nice.
So he's got obviously pretty heavily involved with the classic era of Doctor Who. And obviously someone that if you're a Doctor Who fan, you should probably be aware of already. John Ringham, who played Ash, the kind of more pacifistic leader of the colonists. He played a character named Tlo-Toxel in The Aztecs, a William Hartnell story, which was only the sixth story of Doctor Who back in the day. He played a character named Josiah Blake in The Smugglers, a Patrick Troughton story. And he actually has an appearance in the movie V for Vendetta.
Oh, okay.
So
Very nice.
For the very eagle-eyed viewer, you can spot him in that movie. Bernard Kay, who played Caldwell, the kind of more sympathetic mining specialist for the IMC, who kind of tries to help the colonists a little bit, ends up staying with them at the end of the story. He played a character named Carl Tyler in the William Hartnell story, The Dalek Invasion of Earth. He played a character named Saladin in The Crusade. He played Inspector Crossland and the director in The Faceless Ones, a Patrick Troughton story, and he was also in the movie Dr. Zhivago. If you've ever seen that movie, the Omar Sharif classic movie. And lastly, we had Tony Conter as Morgan, the more militant henchman of the IMC, and Captain Dent. He played a character named Thatcher in The Crusade, along with Bernard Kay, which was a William Hartnell story, and he doesn't turn up again until later in the Peter Davison era, when he played Jackson in the Davison era story Enlightenment. So, little background for you Classic Who fans. Some trivia before we get started. Excuse me. This is the first time that Jo sees the interior of the Doctor's TARDIS in Travels. So we get the bigger on the inside line. So
yes, we do.
So were you happy to get that line?
I always love that. Yes.
And a lot of fun, was it? Yeah.
It was a lot of fun, and it was nice seeing the Doctor kind of look all happy that he's that they're moving again. In So I don't know. Has he been able to go inside the TARDIS? It's just not allowed to leave Earth.
Exactly.
I mean, is that where he's still living in the TARDIS?
Yeah, essentially that's his home. Is it? Yeah, he's still living there. He's taken, there was an Inferno, one of the previous stories that we talked about here on Next Stop Everywhere, is that he basically dismantled the console and brought it out through the doors and reassembled it.
Okay.
And to work on it. And so yeah, he's able to go in and out of the TARDIS. It's just that the TARDIS can't go anywhere.
Okay, got it.
But it's still dimensionally transcendental. It just can't travel anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why he kind of keeps it in his lab at unit headquarters. A little bit of trivia: the script editor Terrence Dix at the time has frequently talked about that he hated the original premise of the Doctor being trapped on Earth, and so he meant to work around this premise as soon as he felt that he could get away with it.
And do we think, I mean, is the reason why budget concerns? That way you could have the same. You didn't have to write a script showing, alien worlds. You didn't have to have necessarily a lot of makeup. So
and also grounded the Doctor on Earth, so they got to tell a lot more Earth-based stories.
Okay.
The problem was that and apparently Malcolm Hulk, the guy who wrote this story, pointed out that this Exile format essentially limits the stories between two types: alien invasion stories and mad scientist stories.
Yes.
So getting the Doctor off Earth obviously expands that a little bit, story potential-wise.
Yeah.
And so what we have here is essentially the Doctor going to this planet, Uxarius, and meeting some colonists that are under threat from this intergalactic mining corporation.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, the Master gets thrown in for good measure. So if things aren't bad enough, the Master comes along because he's on the hunt for a doomsday weapon. So that's the kind of premise for this one.
So I don't want to jump away your topics, but I always do.
Yeah, this is true.
I don't think you needed both stories.
Okay.
I think there was enough to just the colony, the evil corporation, the whole that conflict.
So do you felt that it ruined it by the Master showing up?
Didn't ruin it. It just made it overly complicated.
Okay.
I always have affirmed, in most cases, I believe that they padded Classic Who to make sure what could have been a 2-episode
story,
two story, they ended up making 4.
Right.
So out of it, that's my only concern. And I think in this case, you didn't need the Master.
So you're saying that if they didn't have the Master, they could have told this 6-episode story in about 3 episodes or so?
Yes.
Yeah.
I think so, yeah.
Is that fair? All right.
I think so.
Okay. All right, let's get into our main topics. First topic, I want to talk about the Third Doctor and Joe, obviously. So we have the Third Doctor finally able to, at least temporarily, get away from his exile on Earth.
Right.
He's very excited about the idea of finally getting on another planet. Jo Grant, meanwhile, this is the first time she steps into the TARDIS. This is her reaction to the Doctor. She thought he was just kind of making all this stuff up at this point. And this is her first trip to an alien planet.
Mm-hmm.
And she's a little nervous about it. The attitude that I get from this rewatch that I did over this past week, she has the impression that she thought the Doctor was kidding all this time, so she didn't really think that he could do this. And so this is her kind of being confronted with this reality that, hey, this guy can actually travel in time and space. So what did you think about the characters in this story?
I I like that as a change of pace.
Yeah.
Her
reluctance.
Yeah, I didn't want to, and so I don't remember why she's hanging with the doctor. I don't remember.
Well, she works for UNIT. She's essentially she was brought in as Joe Grant, or excuse me, Liz Shaw's replacement. When they wrote Liz Shaw out.
What, and remind me what Liz's job is?
Liz was a scientist, but essentially they felt that the doctor needed an assistant, someone to help him with his test tubes or bring him coffee or tea or whatever.
Okay.
And so she essentially helps him works with him at UNIT as kind of like a helper assistant.
Okay, yeah, so she's not necessarily a scientist.
No.
She is
just kind of like
assistant.
Almost like an intern almost.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that makes a little more sense.
Does all the grunt work that nobody else wants to do.
Yeah, she has no interest in this.
Right.
She didn't want to go off-world. She is immediately, let's go back.
Mm-hmm.
I liked that just because it was a change of pace. It made her seem
real,
a little more, because not everyone would want to. Everyone always, I can't wait to travel with the doctor, and there's at least a few people that will go, no, this is a bad idea. Get me back to Earth.
Right.
So, how about you? What is your thought? Did that bother you?
No, I mean, well, by this time, like I've seen some Joe episodes.
Yes.
I thought it was a little unusual given the fact that she was kind of like, I thought she was a bit braver than that. But to her credit, though, even though she's initially reluctant about going off Earth and wants to go back quickly, she makes the best of it. She realizes that these colonists need help, so she tries to help them as best as she can, given her skill set. And I think after the end of the adventure, she's much more accustomed to the idea, and it doesn't frighten her like it did at the beginning.
Yeah, and I thought that was an interesting story. The character,
the character actually grew a little bit during that story. Yeah,
and so I thought that was very cool.
Yeah, and Katy Manning, she's very adorable. She's kind of like that kooky assistant to the doctor that she seems a little bit more real, like somebody that this would be a much more believable reaction to, like, oh, hey, you can go in time and space, awesome, let's go.
Yes,
like you said, not everybody would be. Now I would go for that, but I'm a Doctor Who fan,
absolutely.
so I'll be all up for that, but maybe not everybody, and especially Joe, who, even though she's seen some strange things by this point, remember this is her fourth story, that the idea that she could leave Earth, and there's this moment where she talks to Ash's daughter, and they have this conversation. Well, hey, we left in 1971, and Joe thinks, oh, you left in 1971? That's where I'm from. Yeah. And she goes, no, 2471. So Joe has to kind of accept that I'm in the future. Holy crap. On top of being in space, I'm in the future.
Yes.
So, but, but she does pretty well from that point. And she kind of gets braver about it as it goes along. Even when she's taken captive, even through all this, she doesn't run, and she doesn't hide, and she doesn't become this this whimpering crybaby about it. She's right there, and so that's to her credit, I think.
I think so too,
especially written for a early 70s companion.
Yes, you have to write it in the context.
Yeah,
and I think that was really nice. So I was happy with that. Like I said, I like the character development. It makes sense that she'd go, oh, this is not what I signed up for. Right. So I was very happy.
Yeah. Now, meanwhile, the doctor is just ecstatic about getting off Earth.
Oh yeah.
he's like, wait, you want to go back? I just got off Earth. I've been stuck on Earth. You realize how boring it is being stuck on one planet and one time all the time? And so he basically tries to say, look, we're doing this and you're going to have to step up. Because, like, I need to get out there because you guys are driving me crazy and I need to get away from you for a while, or at least get away from Earth for a while. And that wanderlust that the Doctor has really steps forward. It comes through in this story, I should say.
It does. I agree.
And so once he's out there, he's happy. He gets like, oh, there's some colonists, and oh, hey, you need some help? Well, okay, I'm right here. I'll do my part. And then ultimately, the Joe and the Doctor, when they see the Master, obviously they've got history by this point, and
yes, they do.
And so they're like, okay, things just went to a whole nother level here. Now, granted, it's a huge coincidence. Really huge coincidence that all in time and space, oh, hey, the Master just shows up at the planet that we're brought to.
But,
or do you think the Time Lords knew the Master was going to get involved?
Yeah, because at the very beginning, we saw the 3 or 4 Time Lords saying, okay, the Master's stolen this doomsday plans. We need to have somebody. And reluctantly, they go, well, no one
else will do
handles
it.
him better than... Yeah, so I think that was the reason why.
Now, what did you, real quick, as an aside, what did you think of the Time Lords at the beginning? Were you surprised by their appearance in this story?
I was a little bit, because you don't see much of them.
Right.
So yeah, I was. It was nice to see them again, and
discussing the Doctor's exile.
Yes, and so it gave you at least a reason why, versus why are we doing? Why all of a sudden can he leave Earth? So they gave us an explanation why,
right?
Which was good to happen.
And it also put the limits on the story that, well, okay, he's still in exile by the end of the story. He just had like one story he could get away, and we could go back to an alien planet and shake things up a little.
Yes, absolutely.
Right. Okay. Anything else about the Third Doctor and Joe before we move on?
Nope. Good to see him. One of the things that it is hard for me to forget, when we were celebrating the 50th anniversary, Russell T Davies, BBC America, I believe. I don't know if it was on BBC proper, but did a series of going through each of the Doctors, showing a classic episode, and for 30 minutes before, they had different talking heads, including Russell T Davies, talk about that Doctor. And when they talked about the Third Doctor, they talked about it was, set on Earth. It was in color, and in a lot of ways, it was a brand new show. But he was James Bond, the super. He does alien karate.
Yeah, the Venusian Aikido. Yeah.
Yeah, and every time he is a lot more active.
Yeah.
Than a lot of the Doctors, about quick to fight. And he does
that a lot in this story.
He does a lot in this story, and he kind of does this.
What'd you think of him going hiya and really getting into
the
it?
Karate chop yell made me smile.
Everybody was kung fu fighting.
Yeah. It instead of being cheesy, it's just something I really liked.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Yeah. It made you smile at least. Yeah.
It did. Yes.
All right. Topic number 2.
Did it bother you?
No. I mean, I'm used to it. I watched a lot of Third Doctor stories, so yeah, I enjoy it quite a bit, and it's just part of that Pertwee charm.
Yes, it is.
To have him do that. Topic number 2: the Oxarius colonists. I'm going to talk about here, and also the Interplanetary Mining Corporation. There's a lot of characters as far as the colonists go, and the IMC go, but so we can just kind of hit the highlights here. What did you think of this conflict between the colonists, who are struggling at this point? They're desperate for food. They've got some primitives around. that are native to the planet, and they're kind of working with them a little bit. They at least have a peaceful relationship. And then you got the IMC that just kind of waltzes in and says, oh, you've got like this rich deposit of this mineral, and I think we're going to take over, and you guys need to leave. And they try to set up this this monster situation where like they basically staged this through like audio visual trickery, and to make the colonists think there's monsters out there. Then that they need to leave the colony. So that's their first trick, is to try to like encourage them to leave on their own. And then when that doesn't work and that fails, then they kind of resort to more physical violence to get rid of them. What do you think about that?
I liked this story.
Mm-hmm.
It, in a lot of ways, this is a trope that the evil corporation, but it works in this case.
Right.
It makes a lot of sense that they do want, the
resources. Yeah.
Yeah, they want the resources. They pretend that, we didn't know, and the end justifies the means.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever we need to do, we're going to get rich by doing this. And if you gotta break a few eggs to make an omelet, Charles. And
right.
If a few colonists die, oh well, they were just colonists. And we're serving the greater good of getting power for Earth and lining our pockets at the same time. This metal, this resource, they can build other things. And versus the colonists are saying, no, Earth is being used up, quote, Firefly, right?
Right.
And so the only way we're going to survive is by going out into space and finding new worlds and working on that. So if we put our energy and our work and our initiative to that, mm-hmm. we can make this work. So nice interaction back and forth. You had various stages of villainous in the corporation. You mentioned the one guy.
Yeah, Norton
was just by far just a jackass.
Right.
He truly doesn't care who he has to kill.
Oh, you're talking
make his goal.
Oh, you're talking about Morgan. Yeah. Morgan.
Yeah.
Morgan was the guy that it was like, okay, let's just really use these guys. And then you had Captain Dent, who's the head of the IMC operation.
And he's kind of, if my people have to get their hands dirty, that's okay.
Right. He's more end justifies the means guy. And then you had Norton, who is this guy that essentially I think is he's essentially working undercover for the IMC. He shows up, claims to be the victim of this giant reptile attack. And he was, I'm from another colony that you've never really interacted with ever, and that was wrecked by these giant reptiles that they're going to try to kill you too. And by the way, you know those native primitives that you're kind of working with. Well, they're going to try and kill you too, and you shouldn't trust them. And then he stages this whole fake murder. They have their one engineer or whatever that's trying to keep the power on, and he kills that guy, knocks out the primitive or whatever, or kills him, and then pins it on the primitive that the primitive is the one that killed the engineer, to all start this whole distrust of the primitives. And he's just a horrible, horrible person.
He is a horrible person.
And it shows you the lengths that the IMC will go to.
Right. And one of the columnists is actually his conscience is bothering him.
Mm-hmm.
Which one is that?
You mean one of the IMC guys?
Yeah.
Caldwell. Yeah, he's this mineralogist for the IMC.
Yeah.
And
he ultimately...
He sympathizes with the colonists.
And he ends up actually changing side at the end. The great Bernard K. I'm looking now on IMDb.
Yes.
As you talked about, great resume, really well done. I liked his being torn.
His conflict.
His conflict was well done. So right. Yeah, I guess
they showed a lot of shades of gray in this story.
Yeah, they did. I think it was a little bit cliche that the IMC is so evil,
right.
But I think it works, and I do think that the columnists were maybe a little too naive.
Mm-hmm.
So we kind of did a little simple good versus evil.
Right.
But I like the story, and I will say this works because I know you're going to bring up that the faith they have in this adjudicator.
Yes.
Like, oh, it's going to be fair, and then when it turns out to be the master, the fix is in.
Pretty much.
You don't have. You're thinking, oh, our cause is so just and right that they'll very much see that we're in the right and they're wrong, and
exactly.
Not so much. Yes.
Yeah. That I should. This pretty much deserves this at this point. I think here. Hold on.
Yes.
The Price is Right fail horn. Yes.
Yes.
It's and that segues perfectly into our third topic, which obviously we're going to talk about the master. Mm-hmm. So, like you said, the adjudicator, it all seems pretty good at first glance, right? The colonists are like, oh, hey, the adjudicator is going to show up, and he's going to give you what for, because, hey, you guys are obviously trying to take over here, and we've been here. We're the colony. We set up this colony here. So once the adjudicator shows up, everything's going to get worked out. Well, nope, not so much, because it's the master. Now, why is the master posing as an adjudicator? Turns out the master has a completely different agenda going on because, hey, it's the master. And the master is all about, oh, this planet Xerius, well, they've got those primitives. Well, turns out their ancestors created this nasty, very dangerous doomsday weapon. And I think I'd like to get my hands on that. Because, hey, I'm the master and that's what I do. So that's why he's there. He doesn't really care about the colonists. He doesn't care about IMC. But his whole thing is like, well, I guess if I get rid of the colonists, that's one less thing I have to worry about. So I'll just give the IMCs obviously in a much better position to do that. So I'll side with IMC, and that's one less thing I have to worry about.
Now, this is the original master, right? Roger Delgado was the first actor.
Yeah, the first actor to play the master on TV, yes.
And so that's kind of cool.
And this is one of his early stories, because he just appeared in like a few episodes earlier in Terror of the Autons with Joe Grant. And he doesn't show up here until episode 4. So the story takes a completely different, right turn here, and it kind of escalates the situation, especially because the Doctor obviously wants to keep the master from getting his hands on a doomsday weapon, and it also kind of gives us a little background on the native Xerians, and we find out through the course of the revelations that the natives were once a very technologically advanced society. They created that doomsday weapon, but that weapon ended up being their doom. Surprise. And as a result, their society kind of regressed to a primitive state that they are now. What did you think of that story, the revelation?
I thought that was interesting. And like I said, it's kind of getting complicated now.
Yes, I agree.
And I was able to follow. But it did feel like, okay, did we really need this other layer of storytelling with this aliens and and the Doomsday, and the Doctor.
It almost feels like two separate stories that were smushed together.
Yes, I absolutely feel that way. And I don't think I think they both could have been independent of them each other. That would have been very, very strong stories in its own case. And if you want it to be set on the same planet, you could have finished it up where, the colonists end up winning, and then the Doctor comes back, and now then the Master is trying to mess things up and to get this Doomsday weapon. But regardless, that's Monday morning quarterbacking.
Yes.
I liked.
What do you think of Delgado as the Master? We haven't talked about that much.
Really good. He is so nice and evil. Dudley Do-Right. Kind of mustache twirling.
I can't remember if we've talked about the first Master before with you.
I don't know if we have or not. I liked him a lot.
Yeah.
I also liked... This isn't as strong as the modern era where they play the Master and the Doctor as, and I brought this up before, the classic Superman, Lex Luthor, where they're rivals, but there was an underlying friendship at one time.
Right.
There's a little bit of this when they're in the TARDIS together, and the Master's explaining stuff to Joe, and they're talking. I like that relationship back and forth. He is just really, really well done. I love the pure evilness of him, but at the same time, there's a charm to him that makes him likable. Yeah. So yeah, this is he set a really high standard for this iconic character.
Yeah, essentially, with Pertwee as essentially like the James Bond of Doctor Who, it almost makes sense to have Delgado's Master, the first Master, as almost like the Bond villain of Doctor Who.
Yes,
and that's kind of what he is in a lot of ways. Right down to almost wearing Nehru jackets as he does in certain episodes.
Yeah.
He's very much a Machiavellian Bondish villain, and who's obviously got a scheme up his hands. But he's very charismatic, and he's got presence, and when he's talking about even in scenes where the Doctor and Joe kind of break into the Master's TARDIS. And did you enjoy actually seeing the inside of the Master's TARDIS for once?
I do. I love when we go into other TARDISes.
Right.
I love that because one of our earliest discussions, Charles, is what does a TARDIS look like? If it's not with the illusion, and you're like, well, it really doesn't matter. And so because it constantly changes his appearance just with the Doctors, he never has fixed that circuit. So I love that.
And the Master's TARDIS can change shape.
Yes, and we have seen him in multiple where he's been a clock or a pile of rocks or everything. So I love seeing the inside.
In this case, a spaceship. Yeah. Yeah,
the inside of the TARDIS with the the round little circles.
Yeah, the roundels. Yeah.
Yeah, that I love the circle round things.
The round things, exactly.
So it's very cool to see that.
And you notice the Master booby-trapped his TARDIS.
Oh, of course. And there's that great scene, right, where he's got Joe captured.
Yeah.
And he's got the button.
Yeah.
Poison gas. And
threatening the Doctor with it. Yeah. That all it takes is one push, and your companion's dead.
And I love seeing the colonists end up saving her.
Right.
They break into the ship.
Yeah, they free her from that container. Yeah.
Which you would, and because the doctor was smart enough to drop the key,
Yeah.
on the ground.
Were you confused by that at first when he does place that key? You're like, why is he doing that?
I assumed that I assumed that there was a purpose.
Right.
So, and then when I saw them, I went, "Oh, they're going to see the key, and that's going to get them in." So it didn't. I knew he was doing it for some reason, and so I thought that was pretty slick.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Anything else about the Master before we move on? Or anything else about the story?
I'm not complaining.
Yeah.
I'm just saying I felt like it was as you said it well. There were two stories that were kind of smushed together. I think dividing it would have made them both better.
Right.
But overall, this is a very long 6 episode. It is a very long one story, but I enjoyed it. I really had a good time watching it. I liked the different characters. I like how it ended up. The good guys won as best as they can. I liked the reveal of, you're thinking everyone's died in the explosion. They set that up really well.
Yeah.
These engines are very unstable.
Oh, with the colonists that you
we're
thought
going to be lucky if we can get out.
Yeah.
And they're like, if that happens, it happens. And then to see it blow up, you're like, holy crap.
Well, even Joe and the Master are like, oh, they just killed all those people.
Yeah. And then to give the reveal, which was set up very well. I mean, they showed the delay, they talked about it, and the pilot
so they surprised you with that.
Himself. Yeah, I like that. It was a good surprise. Okay. It was a good surprise.
Yeah, that it was just the leader of the colony, Ash, sacrificing himself to save the others. Because he knew that ship wouldn't make it off planet.
Right.
Okay. All right. Ready to move on. Favorite lines of the episode.
There wasn't as many in this.
All right.
I know you always have a few.
Yes, I do.
Go ahead and share what you've got, and I will. I didn't. There's a couple of them I liked. Like there's a scene where the Master says, "I'm afraid you're both about to become victim of stray bullets."
That's a great line. Yes.
Yeah.
That's a great line.
The Master's really good. How about you? Talk to me.
Exchange between Caldwell and the Doctor earlier in the episode. Caldwell says, "Are you some kind of scientist?" And the Doctor replies, "I'm every kind of scientist."
Yes, I love that line. There's just so much fun when the Doctor's being arrogant.
Yes.
And is it arrogance when it's,
It's not arrogance if you can back it up.
That's what I was going to say. Are you being cocky if you can do it?
Right.
And I think absolutely, yes.
All right. You talked about the Doctor and the Master, so I got I got a few Master and Doctor quotes. Okay. The Master says, "So, you've at last succeeded in escaping from your long exile on Earth. Congratulations. What are your plans now?" The Doctor replies, "Well, my immediate plans are to expose you as an imposter." And the Master replies, "That would be very foolish of you. My credentials are immaculate." The Doctor replies, "Forged, of course." The Master counters, "Of course, but immaculate."
Yes, very nice.
Yeah, that was good. The Doctor and Master again, later in the story. "So, you intend to hold the universe to ransom?" And the Master replies, "Doctor, why don't you come in with me? We're both Time Lords. We're both renegades. We could be masters of the galaxy. Think of it, Doctor. Absolute power. Power for good. Why, you could reign benevolently. You could end war, suffering, disease. We could save the universe." And the Doctor says, "No, absolute power is evil." And the Master counters, "Consider carefully, Doctor. I'm offering you a half share in the universe."
Yeah, that was good.
That was good. And one last one. The Master says, "Look at all those planetary systems, Doctor. We could rule them all." And the Doctor replies, "What for? What is the point?" And the Master replies, "The point is that one must rule or serve. That is the basic law of life. Why do you hesitate? Surely it's not loyal to the Time Lords who exiled you on this one insignificant planet." And the Doctor replies, "You'll never understand, will you? I want to see the universe, not to rule it."
Yeah,
and that kind of sums up the Doctor quite well.
It does. I mean, why would I want to rule it when I can just go
visit it?
I mean, yeah.
Explore it.
I can, there's the old thing, boy, this will show you how old I am, right? See the USA in your Chevrolet. See the universe in my TARDIS. That's all I want.
Everybody go quick Google that.
Yes.
And look that one up. All right. Do you have a rating for this story?
I do. I give this 8 out of 10 French drops.
Oh.
And if you know what a French drop is, it is the actual, what they call the move where you appear to have a coin in your hand.
Oh yeah, the magic trick.
And
yeah.
so
what did you think of the Doctor's magic trick?
Oh, I loved him doing that. And it's in your ear, and it's there.
Yeah.
And by the way, when I'm in a conference call or I'm in a meeting, I often I cannot do a French drop at all.
Right.
But I play with that.
My dad, when he was a lot younger, he could do that pretty well. But as he's gotten older, obviously he can't do it anymore. But he used to be.
Google
really
up the French drop trick, and you'll get a kick out of that.
Some basic sleight of hand magic.
Yes.
Right.
How about you, Charles?
We're in sync.
Rating?
We're in sync on this one. I give it 8 out of 10 Doomsday Weapons.
Ah, good.
So solid 8 out of 10. Decent Pertwee story.
Yeah.
Maybe not the best, but it's certainly not the worst. And it's really pretty enjoyable.
Yeah, his little scarf, his little frilly shirt, and his kind of cape.
You mean a cravat?
Yeah. He's a fun Doctor.
Or a bow tie, rather. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Quick reverse the polarity segment since we're running in on time. If you enjoyed this story, I'm going to recommend Utopia as a modern alternative to this one. Of course, that was the 11th episode of Series 3 in 2007, written by Russell T. Davies. Essentially, you had this one. The Doctor goes to Cardiff to refuel the TARDIS. Captain Jack Harkness sees him and tries to jump on board, literally, and ends up going for a ride. The TARDIS ends up in the year 100 trillion, where the Doctor, Martha, and Jack explore the planet, find this abandoned city, and encounter this lone human running from the future kind, these kind of primitive, cannibalistic humanoids. So that's kind of like the comparison to the primitives in this story. And they attempt to reach a nearby missile silo to reach transport to Utopia, the last hope of the human race. While there's like a group of survivors, kind of like the colonists in Colony in Space, led by Professor Yana, who turns out to be, surprise, the Master. So
yes.
So there's another connection, and so that's kind of like the basic connection to Colony in Space, in my opinion. So it's kind of a similar vibe to it a little bit.
Absolutely. Do we have any feedback this time, Charles?
We do. We do have. We've got a couple here. Let's see here. So first, we've got the return of Holly Mack, who just talked about some Doctor Who with me, not just one episode ago.
Yes,
where we talked Battlefield.
There was a shot.
Yeah.
In that episode about a certain co-host not reading full emails.
Well, that's one thing we're going to talk about.
There was a and I take great
umbrage.
Umbrage, and my feelings were hurt.
Yeah.
Only because we are usually an hour plus
right
in our recording, and I am trying to keep things moving along.
Okay.
That does not.
So
never do I not appreciate the feedback from our listeners, and I say, shame on you, sir. Shame on you.
So he counters the shot with a shot against my time management, in case you're wondering. All right, fair enough. I'll give you that. All right. So Holly, meanwhile, writes in, "Hey, Charles and Jesse. I wonder which group of Time Lords gave the power back to the TARDIS for the Doctor. The Celestial Intervention Agency or some other group?" So the Celestial Intervention Agency is kind of like the Time Lord CIA of here on Earth. Was chuckling how the brig was trying to get the Doctor to bite at the latest Master sighting, and the Doctor ignoring him. And the Brigadier ordering the Doctor to come back after the TARDIS was almost like Darren or the Major ordering Samantha and Jeannie to come back after they got into some trouble.
You come back here right now. Get right back here.
Yeah, except in this case, it wasn't the doctor's fault. Joe's reaction to landing on another planet and then realizing that Doctor's stories were true reminds me of this paraphrased lyric. I may have been stringing you along, and that I told you few, but sooner or later you're going to realize some of my lies are true. That's a song you're going to need to look up. It's a little bit of trivia there.
Nice.
I'm not going to reveal that. I'm going to leave that a mystery. So if you want to look that up. I don't blame Joe for wanting to stick close to the Doctor because of the colonists on the planet. Wonder if these lizards are in any relation to the Silurians. I don't know. They just kind of look like regular lizards that were kind of blown up using a projector screen.
Yes.
So I don't know. Maybe.
And I do say
it's Doctor Who, so maybe.
Yeah, the little bitty,
Yeah.
The head guy.
Yeah.
Was kind of small. This little.
Oh yeah, the little primitive, like the guy of the
head primitive.
Yeah, the head. Well, it was like I think he was one of the more advanced society members that were still around.
Yes.
But he's got this little teeny baby body, and it's kind of like almost used like basically like a normal human head with like a puppet body, and it looks really odd. And we didn't talk about that guy, but he's very interesting. Of course, Dent's group can't be trusted. Joe and David make quite the team. Let's see. The Venusian Aikido makes a reappearance. Love it.
Yes.
And of course, the adjudicator would be the master. The Doctor using a magic trick to interest the guard that was about to sacrifice them and then knocking him out was a smart move for a little while. Yeah, Doctor, you're a free agent. You still don't know which Time Lords freed you. Interesting. And of course, the Master gets away to wreak havoc another day. Not a bad story. This is my first time watching it. Oh, good. So we got you to try something you hadn't watched. That's good. Excellent. Good. Never a bad thing when you're a Doctor Who fan. I think some stuff could have been trimmed, but it's still an episode worth watching. Wrap it up here. Holly from Wisconsin.
Yay, Holly.
Yay, Holly. And spoilers, everybody. Holly will return to Next Stop Everywhere.
Yay!
I'm just going to
leave that. She did a good job. I liked the episode.
She did a great.
I thought she did a good job. Yeah,
she did a great job, and it's always great to hear from Holly. And on a side note, if once you finish listening to Next Stop Everywhere, you can check out Holly on the Five-ish Fangirls podcast. I'm just going to give her a free plug.
Yeah, very nice.
She's so great about writing in. All right, please check that out. So, also, we got a new listener writing in for the very first time. We got a Facebook note, which is kind of weird, but still cool, still perfectly acceptable, from Terry Stevens, who is described in this as a 62-year-old, stable, happily married, with 3 sons, fan woman, in all caps. Not fangirl, fan woman. And this is regarding Death of the Doctor from the Sarah Jane Adventures that Jesse and I talked about.
Yes.
So Terry writes in and says, I was gritting my teeth when Jesse quoted this line but then left out the rest.
Okay.
And the line is, Joe says, so you've been watching me all this time? And the Doctor replies, no, because you're right. I don't look back. I can't. But the last time I was dying, I looked back on all of you, every single one, and I was so proud.
Oh, nice.
So Terry says, that means when 10 regenerated, he not only saw the people who appeared in his arc, but, and she puts this in all caps, every single companion he ever had, exclamation mark, exclamation mark. You also made the comment that RTD understands that he just can't look back, when obviously RTD does understand that need, at least from 10's perspective. Mm-hmm. In fact, and admittedly, it might have been Julie Gardner, one of the showrunners on Doctor Who at the time, the modern Who, and not RTD that said this, but in the commentary for The End of Time, one of them said, wouldn't it be wonderful to say goodbye, to be able to say goodbye to everyone you have ever met and cared for in your life when you knew your death was imminent? Too bad 11 felt that way, and 12 as well, because the ones they loved visited them. Okay, 12's was just memories, but still, and not the other way around. Another interesting thing is that 11 referred to the regeneration as dying, which everyone always picked apart RTD's treatment of it, with 10 as such. Anyway, gotta dash, some random podcast is on. Hopefully you mean Next Stop Everywhere. And she says, P.S. I want this shirt so badly. And she sends a little JPEG of guns don't kill people, Stephen Moffat kills people.
Ah, very nice.
So thank you, Terry, for writing in. Always great to hear from a new listener. And
it is. That is wonderful.
I don't know how long you've been listening, but you're new to writing in, and we're always great to hear it. So it's great. So another person calling out Jesse for chopping those quotes up.
No, now that I will not.
That's two people calling him.
Wow, that is rough.
Yeah.
We would want to read the whole.
Yeah.
The whole.
Right. Quote.
The whole script.
Yeah.
A lot of times, Well. So anyway.
Well, Jesse has a good point, because we do obviously run long, and yours truly is no help whatsoever in that regard, as you can probably tell already. But Jesse's trying to help us out in that regard. So
absolutely,
got to cut him a little slack on that one.
Thanks.
I'm going to stand up for Jesse here today.
Thank you.
Next week I'll throw him under the bus because he won't be here. But today, yeah. No.
Yes.
All right. It's all. I do it with love.
You were just hoping I wasn't going to listen, but of course I listen to Next Stop Everywhere when I'm not on, because I'm a fan.
I hope you do.
Yes.
You do. Well, for any other fans that might be out there that want to drop us a line, just like Holly and Terry did, you can reach us at nextstopeverywheresmg@gmail.com. That's nextstopeverywheresmg for Southgate Media Group, in case you're wondering, at gmail.com. Or you can reach us on Twitter at nextstopsmg, or on Facebook, Next Stop Everywhere, the Doctor Who podcast, or on Instagram at Next Stop Everywhere podcast. And while you're there, hey, you might want to check out this little number, as I'm wearing right now, the officially official new Next Stop Everywhere t-shirt. I posted a link not too long ago, so if you're interested, or you're a fan of the show, you want to show some support, want to pick up some Next Stop Everywhere merch, there's a link on that Facebook page about how to do that, or in another place, which I'll talk about here in a minute. So, Jesse, how about you? Where can they reach you on the interwebs?
Well, you can hear me in about a week, depending on when this comes out.
Yeah.
Talking all things DC Universe Titans.
Yeah.
With a certain co-host who loves me, except when I'm not there, and then talks bad about me.
Aww.
That I say that with tongue in cheek. I hope everyone knows how much Charles and I love each other.
Yep.
Titan Talk is back. Season 2 of Titans is coming. I've seen the preview. We've seen pictures. It looks amazing. So we will be talking about that, the DC Universe Titan series, on a weekly basis. Then you can also, if you are just catching up on Krypton or The Boys, Charles and I do a Fandom Zone podcast, where we talk about TV shows on television. That's going to be on a brief hiatus while we're doing Titans, but certainly go back and check some of the past episodes. And then, of course, Set Lusting Bruce, the Bruce Springsteen podcast, where I talk to Bruce Springsteen fans from around the world, talking about their love of the boss. And shout out to Holly. Holly just emailed me with a Bruce Springsteen birthday greeting, as I'm working on 70 for 70. Bruce turned 70 in September, and I'm trying to get 70 different people in voices and emails to wish him happy birthday for a special Set Lusting Bruce episode.
Excellent.
Charles, how about you?
Well,
what are you doing when you're not talking Doctor Who?
I'm always talking Doctor Who. What are you talking about? But on those off chances that I'm not talking about Doctor Who, and how rare those are, you can reach me at Charles Skaggs on Twitter, at Charles Skaggs on Instagram, Facebook at Charles Skaggs in Hilliard, Ohio, and my blog of geeky things,
damn good coffee. And hot.
Damn good coffee and hot, where I talk about all the stuff we talk about here on Next Stop Everywhere. Doctor Who, Torchwood, The Sarah Jane Adventures, all kinds of comic book sci-fi news, all kinds of news about my other podcasts that I do for Southgate Media, including the aforementioned Fandom Zone podcast that I do with Jesse, where we just recorded our Boys Season 1 wrap-up episode. So if you're a fan of Amazon Prime's The Boys, we just did that. That's going to be posting here shortly. So please check that out. And then that podcast, like Jesse says, going on hiatus while we switch over to Titan Talk, the Titans podcast. And we're going to talk Titans Season 2. So please check out Titans Talk. We'd definitely appreciate that. Or Ghostwood, the Twin Peaks podcast they do with Zan Sprouse, whom you've heard here so wonderfully on Next Stop Everywhere, where we talk about all things Twin Peaks and David Lynch. And lots of fun there. So if you enjoy Jesse and me bantering like we do here, please come over to Titan Talk. We're going to have a lot of fun talking Titan Season 2 from the DC Universe. And if you enjoy Zan and me, you can check out Ghostwood. So we'd definitely appreciate that. Otherwise, come on back
What's next?
Oh, I should mention also on Damn Good Coffee and Hot, if you want to reach, if you do want to get one of these spiffy Next Stop Everywhere t-shirts that look so stylish at your next Doctor Who convention, or wherever, you can get some information on how to do that on my blog, Damn Good Coffee and Hot, as well as our Facebook page.
So, Charles, what's coming up next on Next Stop Everywhere?
So, next time on Next Stop Everywhere, we're going to go even farther back in the classic era. We're going to go all the way back to the William Hartnell era as DJ Nick makes his return to Next Stop Everywhere. It's always fun to have DJ Nick aboard. And we're going to talk The Time Meddler, the very first appearance of the monk, and who is the very first other member of the Doctor's race of Gallifreyan Time Lords that is not the Doctor and Susan. So essentially, the monk is essentially a prototype of the Master. So you might want to check that out. And
sounds interesting.
Pretty good historical-based story, but the monk obviously complicates things. And it's the first time we got to meet another member of the Doctor's race, and who has his own TARDIS and is up to shenanigans, as you might expect. Historical shenanigans. And so it's going to be a lot of fun, and it's a fun little story, and a good history lesson on top of it. So
perfect.
Come on back. DJ Nick's always a blast, and it's going to be a lot of fun. So everybody check that out. That'll be next time for episode, where are we at? 153 next time on Next Stop Everywhere. Jesse, any final words before we
sign
off?
All right. It was a lot of fun, and I'm looking forward to hearing DJ Nick back on the show.
Yep, he's always great. And our Italian stallion himself, DJ Nick.
Indeed.
And everybody, come on back. Time Meddler, episode 153. It's going to be a lot of fun. And we'll see you next time right here. Next Stop Everywhere, the Doctor Who podcast. Goodbye, everybody.
Goodbye.